Good morning, everyone. We're just be a few minutes before we get started. Thanks.
Is red. Oh, now it's. The mics work, at least that one. My apologies for coming in late today. To everybody who's online, welcome to this September Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee meeting. My name is Takis Karantonis. I'm the CEEPC chair this year, and I'm a member of the Arlington County Board. As I just mentioned that I made a fatal mistake. I drove here, and I thought that I had enough head time to come, and of course I was wrong about that. But this is an insight on one thing, besides my mistake. The thing that our streets are, again, really full. There is a congestion out there. And all the time I was driving, I was thinking, how well would I be in metro, commuting to here, especially after this summer that has been absolutely, I hope that for any doubting person on the globe, very eye-opening about what the challenge of the climate emergency is. So before we start, one question: do we have quorum?
We are currently, staff is looking at that.
Okay, but we can at least advance with one announcement that I have to make. Before we start committee business, we received a public comment letter from Mr. Todd Auburn. This public comment letters and some supporting materials that deal with issues of environmental justice, the way our transportation accounts for challenges in environmental justice. We'll have a short conversation later in this meeting as well. I asked talk staff to publish them with the proceedings of this meeting. They're available on the website. I want to let everybody know that this committee doesn't have as a regular agenda item public comment. Because we are sort of a subcommittee, two committees like MWAC and TBB, the Transportation Planning Board, that actually have this regular agenda procedure. And this is when, public comment can be offered in person, and with all the procedural environment that this entails. We have always welcomed these. Any public input, we always publish them. We always include them in the proceedings of this committee. Everybody should go and read them and prepare for their, corresponding meetings at TPP and at MWAC. So I don't know if we have a quorum now. Do we? So should we?
I think we do.
We do. Excellent. So then after having commented on the issue of public comment, I would like to move to our agenda. Are there any, I hope everybody had the opportunity to go through it, to read it. Are there any amendments or the desire to change things on this agenda? I hear none. So I proceed with the agenda as submitted. The first piece of business today is to adopt the meeting summary from our July meeting. And before we do, I have checked with quorum, so we're okay. So I would welcome a motion and seconds to approve the July meeting summary. That can be also, motions can be done also online, but just state your name and your jurisdiction, please. Motion to approve. Councilmember Dybala.
Yeah, Cindy DeBala, Tacoma Park, moved.
So this is moved. Is it properly second? Anybody seconding? Thank you. Your name and jurisdiction. Ivy. Excellent. So it's properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye, or at least those who are not in favor say nay.
Aye.
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 Yes, please. Who's Ms. Holman? Oh, no. So I don't hear any nays on that. So this to me is approved. So that was for our July meeting notes and summary. So moving on to our committee and member updates, we'll get a joint meeting of BIAC and Regional Electric Vehicle Deployment Working Group report from Mr. Robert Christopher, if he is online or here. Is he? Yes, here he is. You have to talk into, eat the microphone.
Eat the microphone, okay. Good morning, everyone. So last week, as Chair Dockin Karen Tonis said, we had a joint meeting of BIAC and the Regional Electric Vehicle Deployment Working Group, largely centered on the issues of zoning and building codes related to electrification. We had a good panel with panelists from the Great Plains Institute, Edison Electric Institute, and the Berkeley Group, as well as staff from the state of Virginia. And we received draft projections from ICF on the implementation strategy. And we are waiting on the final data from the draft projections by the beginning of next week, I believe. I think that is it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Christopher. Is the BIAC chair with us today, Ms. Ashbacher?
Yes, I am here virtually.
Okay, if you want to add something to the report.
Great. Thank you and good morning, Chair Karen Tonis and CEEPC members and guests. I am Dawn Ashbacher, Manager of Climate and Energy in Frederick County, Maryland, and the BIAC Chair. And as Mr. Christopher mentioned, BIAC met last Thursday in a joint meeting with REVD. We focused on zoning and building codes, which are two sections I want to mention of the local government EV ready checklist that COG staff published on the EV Clearinghouse in July. And the EV Clearinghouse is a resource intended to support COG member jurisdictions on EV deployment within their government operations, as well as community-wide. And it includes resources on grants and incentives, local EV plans, and laws and regulations. So that is available on the COG website. And then we did have the discussion that Mr. Christopher mentioned. And last week, some of the discussion points talked about were EV needs for multifamily housing, code language for EV charging, parking space requirements for commercial buildings and employee parking, and then also the presentation that was mentioned. So I also want to acknowledge that the EV work is being done under the leadership of REVD, which is chaired by Virginia Burke, who is the Maryland Department of Transportation Electric Vehicle and Air Quality Programs Manager. BX next meeting is November 16, and that will be part 2 of the grid series on energy, the energy transition, building integration, and the future of the electric grid. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ashbacher. I have to say, I am observing the proceedings of this committee with very high interest, and I cannot be more thankful to staff and to the leadership of this committee for actually getting things done and bringing forward a lot of interesting insights at a really fast pace, which I have to say. And part of this is also Leah Box, who's next to me. She will provide an update of our public advisory committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair Karen Tunis. ACPAC leadership had conflict today, so I'll be giving the update. Just some quick announcements on the 2023 Climate and Energy Leadership Awards. The projects have been judged and winners elected across the 3 categories: NGO, government, and educational institution. Winners will be announced in a press release at the October 11th COG board meeting. ACPAC met last week where they dug into the climate and energy, climate and weather conditions leading to the Canada wildfire and the smoke air quality events that occurred in June in the metropolitan Washington region. You may also remember that in March, this committee and MWAC approved ACPAC to update the 2017 Environmental Justice Toolkit. And you'll hear more about that later in my presentation on the agenda. But internally, COG staff has been working to coordinate its equity-related work across the climate and energy air programs. That includes the work led by ACPAC. The committee is eager to get started and will work with COG staff on its role. ACPAC's next meeting is November 13th. And that is all I have for today on ACPAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boggs. Always very appreciated the update from our Public Advisory Committee. Mr. Antoine Thompson, next with Smart Cities. Clean Cities, which is also automatically also Smart Cities.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Just the Antoine Thompson, Executive Director, Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition. Just a couple quick things. One, we want to let everyone know that we are gearing up for our conference, which will be a pre-conference is on Tuesday. We're going to have a number of great workshops around EV planning, maintaining EV chargers. There's like 4 pre-conference workshops. So all those who are thinking about EVs, our own Rob Christopher is going to be one of our presenters. We have 3 on that EV planning tools, so you'll be excited to participate in that. We have 3 presenters that will help you figure out about how to maintain those EV chargers as well, which is 20% of the time, 20% of chargers on any given day are not working around the country. So you want to come get some good information on that. And there are 2 other workshops. One is on pre-conference workshop on should you lease or buy. Many of you are in local government, so you know that's a big option. Do you want to buy that electric vehicle? Do you want to lease it? And there's other vehicles we'll talk about as well. Then we have the full conference. This is our 30th anniversary, so we will be recognizing 2 one current and 1 former COG member, staffer. Some of you may or may not know Leah used to run the Clean Cities program for many years. George Nichols, I was able to talk with him the other day, and so he's going to be at the luncheon on October 4th. And then we'll have, some of you may or may not know, Ron Flowers, who was the first executive director for Greater Washington. And then many of you know Ira Dorfman. So we'll have a little tribute during the luncheon as well. We have a number of elected officials at the state and federal level. We have, I think, 5 or 6 panels on Wednesday as well. So it's going to be at Homewood Suites in Largo, Maryland as well. Last thing I would just say that there are a lot of funding announcements out there. There's a couple projects you may want to apply for. Let us know. One is a Jumpstart grant from the Department of Energy that we will be looking for partners for, where we can do a pilot project with you. It's a small project. We will dedicate like 6 months to help you on a pilot project. There's a Clean Energy to Communities grant. It's that you can apply for directly in January, I think it is. DOE started promoting it. It's a $20,000 to $30,000 grant to work on a project around either EV or clean energy in your community. So if you are interested, send me an email, or you can go right to the DOE website, or just type in Clean Energy to Communities. It's a small grant, but it can help you do some great work. And we'll be assigned to work with you for like 6 months. So
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
thank you.
When was again the award event?
Which one?
The big one, your upcoming.
Oh, yeah, the pre-conference is on Tuesday. That's the EV training and stuff. And then the full conference is on Wednesday, October 4th.
So
So
they're
3rd
coming
and
up.
4th,
They're
yes.
just
Next week, yes.
Literally next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Next, from our recycling committee on the list of updates, Adam Riedel is with us to provide an update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the COG Recycling Committee met last week. The topic of the discussion was composting programs in the region. We heard from representatives from DC, Prince George's County, and Compost Crew, which is a private company with a strong presence in the region, to hear about their different programs and approaches to collecting food waste and other organic material throughout their respective jurisdictions, as these types of programs and a focus on organics continues region-wide. The committee in June launched our annual Go Recycle campaign. This is a multi-jurisdiction, region-wide education and outreach campaign really to focus on common good recycling behaviors. COG raised about $70,000 in sponsorship from various local governments and private entities involved in this space. The money purchases broadcast radio, streaming radio, digital web, and paid social media advertising to reach as many folks as we can in the area. The message was, again, recycle right, but more specifically, reduce waste by recycling paper, flat cardboard, plastic bottles, and cans. Those are really the 4 core materials that, regardless of systems, and employed by various entities in the region, they're all collected and recycled, along with don't bag recyclables, which is key. Bagged recyclables are discarded directly by the processing facilities. They will not open bags, and we see that problem cropping back up. So it was one of our messaging points. And then COG is seeking federal funding for future Go Recycle campaigns, as well as battery management education outreach campaigns. That would be through an EPA grant. I think in the next few weeks we should hear about whether COG has been one of the recipients of that grant. And the committee will meet again in December. And those are the updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting work and a lot going on with our recycling committee as well. I'm always surprised how much more we need to do on this. Regional Tree Canopy Subcommittee, Mr. Brian Lecouteur, I understand, has a report from this committee, except if Chair Knapp is in the meeting, which I don't see right now.
Yeah, this is Mike Knapp, Chair of the Regional Tree Canopy Subcommittee. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
We do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair and CEEPC members. Again, I'm Michael Knapp. I work with Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services. We want to provide a quick update on our primary project, which is the report on the Regional Tree Canopy Goal recommendations, which has 3 parts. Part 1 is entitled A Case for Conserving Trees and Forests. in the Metro Washington region. The report presents recent tree canopy gain loss trends in the region and the benefits and services provided by our regional tree canopy and why it's important to conserve trees and forests at both a local and regional level. That particular report, the final draft is finished. Part 2 is entitled Tree Canopy Goals for the Metro Washington Region. This offers tree canopy goals at different geographic scales, along with associated best management practices to help COG membership jurisdictions conserve this important resource over time. That draft is almost completed. It's around 99% complete. Part 3 is entitled Identifying the Right Level of Tree Canopy for Your Community. And it presents a process and tools that can be used to identify canopy goals that straddle the line between aspiration and pragmatism while balancing a wide range of socioeconomic, environmental, and ecological concerns. That draft is at around 80%. Our next step is an internal review by Jeffrey King, and the committee is scheduled to meet on October 20th. And that's all I have for an update for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Knapp. Quick question. What do you anticipate to be the approximate delivery time for the drafts that are now in their final stretch?
Well, part 1 and part 2 are both ready to share with Jeff. Part 3 still is going to take, I would anticipate, another 2 to 3 weeks of work. And part of that is contingent on the review of both, well, actually part 2. There are components of part 2 that we want to get feedback on from internal COG staff before we finalize part 3. So to answer your question, it could be as soon as maybe the 3rd week of October.
Excellent. Thank you for that information, Chair Knapp. So dear colleagues, now it's time to make the round of our jurisdictions and see what's going on in your neck of the region. We will start with the District of Columbia. Any updates from DC? Not hearing any. Any updates from Maryland? Councilmember Ivy, I see you.
Go for it.
Or yeah, Councilmember DiBala.
Thank you. Well, from Prince George's County, I can't speak for the whole state. And in fact, in Prince George's County, I can only right now speak for District 5. But we are working on when, in a case where trees are being left out of a plan that would normally be there for a parking lot for various reasons where it's impossible to add enough trees. We're having the developer instead add solar panels over enough of the parking spots to add that level of shade, plus it'll of course add power to the grid. And in addition, we're looking at the what do you call it? The permeable pavers for the parking lot as well. So it doesn't clean the air, but it does, like trees would, but it does do something. It is a help. So that's what we're looking at right now in Prince George's County in District 5.
And
Thank you.
probably helps also save money from excessive stormwater mitigation down.
It saves money in many ways, but what I'm hoping is that you once people know how something works, then because the developer wasn't familiar even with the permeable the pavers, and seem to think that you couldn't use them in a parking lot. I'm like, no, we have them in parking lots in other places, and I could name them. So I think that once people know that something's available and that it works and it's been working for years, then they're more open to using those things in other developments. So I think a lot of it's just education.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Bala.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging me. I just wanted to say that the city of Tacoma Park has brought on a sustainability manager. Yay.
Yeah.
Dorothy Estrada, apologies to Hyattsville. Yeah, I'm really excited because as you all know, we've been looking for a bit. And I'm really looking forward to gearing back up in Tacoma Park.
Thank you.
Could I say a couple?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. It's really nice to meet this committee and thank you for the warm introduction, Councilmember Dubala. Yeah, Doria Estrada, City of Tacoma Park Sustainability Manager. Just briefly can share that we've got a really exciting, I think, few months ahead with new programs and picking up projects that were left with Gina Mathias's departure last year. One of them being Electrify MC, a new program in Montgomery County that is open now. There will be a full launch, I believe, on October 13th. It's an incentive program for single-family homeowners to adopt different electrification and energy efficiency technologies for their home. It includes incentives at the closure of the project rather than having a rebate to apply for later. And it is not a first come, first serve. It's going to be, our colleagues at the DEP informed us yesterday that it's structured in a way that it's concentrated by where the greatest number of single family homes are in the various districts. So yeah, that's a great program and we're excited to be partnering with them on that.
Very interesting news.
If I could just add one thing, just briefly, my chief of staff is on the call, and she just reminded me that we're about to have a ribbon cutting in Fairmont Heights for an affordable housing development that's being solar powered. So we're excited about that.
Great. We will have a conversation about how much solar we have to add on the roofs of everything, and starting for affordable housing, of course, and public buildings, by the way. Are there any other officials or leading staff that is participating today from any jurisdiction in Maryland that wants to provide an update on things that happen in their jurisdictions? I don't see any. Let's go over to Virginia. And I will take the privilege to start. Arlington County, I'm very, very excited to announce something that I will leave it to those who actually did the very hard work to get us there. The short title to that is that Arlington County was awarded LEED platinum level for cities certification with the U.S. Green Building Council. And I think that we have Demetra McBride with us, who I would like to put on the spot to tell us more about that, because she was among the leading staff who did that.
Great. Thank you so much, Board Member Karen Tonis and Chair of the committee. We are happy, as a lot of you know, the program launched approximately 6 years ago. The USGBC was very ambitious at that time at going to a community standard. In the intervening 6 years, USGBC did what it usually does, which is it progressively raises the bar. So this year, the criteria was much more commanding and demanding to reach that level. I do want to call out Paul Roman in the AIR team. Paul is an unbelievably gifted architect specializing in sustainable design as well as embodied carbon. And he is with the AIR team and manages the Green Building Program. So he took lead on really coordinating across the county organization. As all of you know, it's an all of government approach and a community-wide approach in order to be successful in sustainability and meaningful climate action. So that is the case with Arlington County, and the AIR team regularly coordinates and collaborates with all of its partners within the county organization. So it's not only AIR or the Department of Environmental Services, but we're really happy to see that our colleagues have really, upped their game and challenged themselves along with us. So thank you very much for calling that out.
Thank you, Dimitra. And I have to say, as being in the political leadership of the county, this is a great achievement. And the gist of that is that it takes literally everybody in the government to understand. So when I hear news about local jurisdictions hiring coordinators and sustainability managers, so this is really what needs to be done, because this is how you get results at the end of accounts. We are not going to sleep on our laurels, of course. We are very, very far from being really platinum in terms of all other impacts that our community has on the environment, our carbon footprint, etc. So we have a long way to go, but this is an encouraging start to be recognized like this with this distinction from the USGBC. So next, I see online, I see Ms. Bagley, council member from the city of Alexandria. Ms. Bagley?
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Karen Tonis. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. Oh, okay. I see the thumbs up from Randy. Okay. I wanted to highlight our own in touching on composting. We are 6 months into a USDA grant-led composting pilot in Alexandria. We have 900 households in it so far, and they are reporting really high levels of satisfaction and benefit from the program. We are wrestling with that uptake has actually been a little slower than we anticipated. We had expected to serve 2,000 people, and so far we only have 900 in the program. So what we're toying with, what staff is sort of considering, is reducing the target number of people, but extending the period of the free pilot to continue to sort of grow it and gather data. But it's encouraging that it is growing and that the people involved in it are finding it really positive and it giving us a lot of good feedback. Also, on the tree front, just this week, or maybe it was last week, the council approved the open space plan for what used to be the Landmark Mall parcel. Y'all regionally are probably familiar with what used to be a big mall site. And there will be 130,000 new square footage of tree canopy on that parcel. There'll be about 160,000 total in about 30K in preserved canopy. There's sort of a park adjacent that's going to be preserved, but I was really encouraged and pleased to hear about those gains to our tree canopy and the thoughtfulness that is going into sort of shade design and shade availability for the recreational spaces that are being developed. So I thought those were two positive developments in Alexandria, and we'll do our best to keep up with our colleagues in the region in that regard.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley. Mr. Freed from, I believe this is Prince Williams County, right?
That's right. I'm with Prince William. Thank you, sir. I will take my cue from Ms. Bagley and the keeping up part. Prince William County has been a bit of a laggard compared to most of the rest of you in terms of climate action planning, but I'm happy to report that the Community Energy and Sustainability Master Plan, which is our term for a climate action plan, that's going to be voted on by the Board of County Supervisors on October 24th. Had Julia Mano, who is the county's Energy and Environmental Sustainability Officer, still been on the line, she'd be reporting this instead of me, but she had to leave. To give you sort of a brief outline, there are 3 cross-cutting measures in the CEEPC and then 25 individual actions. The cross-cutting measures include applying an adaptive management framework, which works well when you're making decisions under uncertainty. The basic premise is to identify metrics, come up with hypotheses for which actions will improve the situation, make sure that you measure and recalibrate. And that approach also allows us to cure some of the the shortcomings in the initial forecast and vulnerability assessment. Second measure is that there's a recommendation that as part of the environmental reviews for all comp plan amendments, rezoning applications, capital improvement projects, that the county evaluate the greenhouse gas implications and the climate resilience implications of the project before making decisions. Third cross-cutting element is some institutional capacity building. In particular, we're proposing to hire a couple of grant writers to go after some of the major funding streams that are available. Jeff is going to actually talk a little bit about some of the funding streams later, I believe. And also some capacity building in terms of communications and outreach, because almost all of the individual actions in the plan are voluntary rather than regulatory. And so we really need to have an effective communication and outreach plan. The 25 specific actions cover the usual suspects. There's some energy supply, some buildings, some transportation, some natural open space, and then a collection of 7 adaptation measures that are kind of cross-sectoral there. That's what is in the current version of the plan. The Sustainability Commission, which I chair, is a citizen-led commission, and we're charged with giving the Board of County Supervisors recommendations on whether to accept the whole plan or subsets of it. We have our meeting tomorrow night, actually. I think it's reasonable to expect that the commission's going to recommend some subsets of the whole kit and caboodle, because the price tag is extremely high for the whole set of actions that had been costed out. And the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness of some of the measures is not nearly as good as the cost effectiveness of others. So we're going to be providing some specific recommendations on which actions we endorse. Anyway, that's the basic story. We expect that by late October, Prince William County will join most of the rest of the region in terms of having a climate action plan that will then get linked, integrated into the comp plan. And also, where the rubber meets the road, of course, is the budgeting process. Many of these actions go directly into the budget. So that's the scoop from Prince William County. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the update from Prince William. These are exciting news. Thank you. Quick look in the virtual room if there are any other additional comments. We are just on time right now. I don't see any. Thank you. So let's move on our meeting agenda with the first action item. We will ask to review and consider an approval on a comment letter on fuel efficiency, on federal fuel efficiency standards for light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. Mr. Tim Masters is virtually with us to update us and to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Karantonis, and good morning, everyone. I'll quickly provide a bit of background information before I dive into kind of the details in the comment letter. So just so people are aware, back in May, CEEPC, along with MWAC and TPB, approved 2 comment letters in support of EPA's light-duty and medium-duty vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards, and also EPA's heavy-duty vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards. So in the past, EPA and the Department of Transportation have worked on rulemakings addressing the greenhouse gas standards, as well as corporate average fuel economy standards, or CAFE standards, together. This year, EPA proposed new greenhouse gas emission standards for vehicles separately, which is what we commented on back in May in support of those greenhouse gas emission standards. And now the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has proposed new CAFE standards. So on July 28th, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration announced the new proposal for model years 2027 through 2032 CAFE standards. That's for passenger vehicles and light trucks. and also model years 2030 through 2035 heavy-duty pickup trucks and vans vehicle fuel efficiency improvement program standards. So the proposed rule was published in the Federal Register on August 17th. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration currently projects that proposed standards would require an industry fleet-wide average for passenger cars and light trucks of roughly 58 miles per gallon in model year 2032, as well as an industry fleet-wide average of roughly 2.6 gallons per 100 miles for the heavy-duty vehicles in model year 2038. So comments on the proposed rule are due by October 16th, and there will also be a virtual public hearing tomorrow, that's September 28th. Just so folks are aware, TPB has already approved the letter as it currently stands. Also, MWAC's Technical Advisory Committee has approved it, but it goes to the full MWAC committee at their meeting later today. So provided we have approval from all three committees by the end of the day, we'll hopefully have this submitted by the end of the week, unless there are any suggestions or edits, etc. So jumping into the comment letter, Robert has it shared here. I'm actually, if you don't mind, gonna share it myself, Robert, just so I can run through it. One moment. Let me bring that up. Okay. All right. So folks should see the comment letter. Anyone not seeing that? If not, I'll continue. Feel free to stop me if it's not showing. But the comment letter as it currently stands is very similar to the greenhouse gas emission standards that I did, that the CEEPC, MWAC, and TPB approved back in May. Very similar language. We kind of used that letter as a template for this comment letter. I'll quickly run through it. You know, it follows kind of the usual COG conventions that we use for comment letters. You can see the first paragraph, we just state our support for the rulemaking. The second paragraph basically just introduces MWAC, the TPB, and CEEPC. The next paragraph here just says reiterates our support for this proposed rulemaking, and also just states the kind of need for these federal programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as criteria pollutants. There's an equity piece here about how underserved communities in the region are disproportionately affected by ambient air pollution and climate change related health impacts. We go on in this paragraph here, top of page 2, to talk about specific criteria pollutants and their relation to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAQS. So that's looking at nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, PM 2.5. So we discussed those, and I want to draw your attention to the next paragraphs here. These two paragraphs were include more of the changes we made to the previous letter towards that went to EPA on greenhouse gas emission standards, and this deals more specifically with the CAFE standards, and we use some of the statistics that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have provided. So we just state that the NHTSA estimates that strengthening these CAFE standards will result in modest increases in NOx and PM 2.5 emissions in 2035, but then in the long term, it decreases those criteria pollutant emissions. We also point out that the reason in the short term those criteria pollutants increase is really due to the forecasted electricity production, which right now is projected to have greater fossil fuel power plant use for charging electric vehicles. So that's kind of the forecast right now, but we also urge the NHTSA to work closely with EPA and the federal government, regional and state partners on implementing additional strategies and measures to further reduce emissions from the power sector. So that's really what this top paragraph here deals with. The next one, we talk more about actual fuel consumption and the fact that these CAFE standards will reduce fuel consumption by 34% between 2022 and 2050 for passenger cars and light-duty trucks, and also 1.9% for heavy-duty vehicles for the same time period. Obviously, that results in significant greenhouse gas emission reductions, as well as criteria pollutant reductions in the long term. So we reiterate our support for these federal control programs, and we just end off stating our support for that. And this will hopefully be signed by the 3 committees and sent off later this week. So as I said before, TPB has already approved this. The Technical Advisory Committee for MWAC has approved it, and therefore it'll be presented at MWAC in a couple of hours. Yeah, I'll leave it there for the committee to vote on. But of course, if there are any questions or comments, any suggestions, please let me know, and we can discuss those shortly. So I'll stop sharing, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Masters, and thank you for all the work that you and your colleagues have invested in the effort. I see Ms. Rosenberg who raised her hand. Ms. Rosenberg, go ahead. Any questions about that?
Thanks for the comments.
Can you please speak up a little bit, because we don't hear you very well here?
Sorry. Why don't you come back to me? I'll put in speakers.
Ms. Rosenberg, I'm sorry, we can barely hear you. You come across a little bit muffled. I don't know if this is the experience of the people in the virtual room, but here definitely I cannot hear you very well.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Far better.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. So a question that we have, and I don't know if it's specifically on these comments or someplace else, but wondering whether COG is looking at the non-tailpipe emissions from cars and trucks, and we're thinking about, the brake dust and the other toxics that come from just operating the vehicles. Is that something that COG is taking on as well?
I'll let Jeff take that question.
Yeah, so that would be in the domain of the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, probably
Okay.
more so than this group. And over the years, they've been focused much more on particularly the nitrogen oxides. It has come up. Black carbon has come up. Certainly, the transportation related non-tailpipe PM sources has come up. But it tends to not be the main focus of the work of MWAC.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would like to invite for a motion to approve this letter for submission to the EPA.
Motion to approve the letter.
Thank you.
Motion seconded.
Seconded, made by by Councilmember, right? Ivy.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Councilmember Ivy, I forget.
And
how
seconded
this
by
works.
Councilor Dybala from Tacoma Park. So it's properly moved and seconded. Is there anybody in this room, virtual and physical, who objects to the letter, who is a nay or abstains? If there isn't anybody, then I will proceed considering this letter as approved, like we do at TPB, which is a very practical way to approve. Thank you. So next to Mr. King, on something that I am absolutely certain that will get established in our acronym vocabulary, CPRG, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Which is an EPA grant coming up, and it's about money to help us, accomplish our goals.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, the other acronym on the transportation side is this CRP, the Carbon Reduction Program within the TPB world. This is coming out of the Environmental Protection Agency, so the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And this is a new program authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act. It is funded to the tune of $5 billion. $250 million of that is slated for planning grant, and in a parallel effort, there is actually the $4.6 billion available for competitive funding for implementation. And the reason this is really important to understand that dynamic of this is that in order to be eligible for the implementation funding, the competitive piece of this, you got to have the project in the plan. So the way this is working nationwide is that the EPA is given formula grants to all states that have opted in. There's been a couple states that have opted out. They get $3 million each for a statewide plan. And then the other piece of this is that there's formula grants for metropolitan statistical areas, otherwise known as MSAs. Interestingly, in our case, and I don't know what the federal government was thinking, but they explicitly excluded our metropolitan statistic area from that formula grant. And I think the logic was that DC as a state is getting $3 million, that we could develop the MSA underneath with the funding that's flowing through the district. So over the summer, we worked with the district. We became kind of the eligible subrecipient. So COG will, underneath this program for the district, be managing the planning grant for the MSA. So if you go to the next slide, one really interesting dynamic of this, and I'm definitely looking forward to this process, is that, clearly, hopefully folks in the room and online are aware of the footprint of the COG memberships. So north all the way up to Frederick County, south down to Charles County, Prince George's, the municipalities within those counties. And then on the Virginia side, out to Loudoun County, Prince William, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria. But the MSA includes some counties that are not COG members that will need to be represented in this plan. So you can see this slide shows it's really the counties to our west and to our south. So, and I won't read the entire list, but interesting set of counties. I think of those, the largest, I think, is Stafford to our south, and rapidly growing and important neighbor. When we, over the summer, had extern from the DC Sustainable Energy Utility doing a lot of research to get smarter about what's going on in these counties. And really interesting aspect of this is the single largest carbon emitting source in the MSA is actually in Warren County. There's a natural gas fired power plant in Front Royal that was explicitly built to serve the electricity load of the data centers in Loudoun County. So some interesting conversations to be had about aspects of this. So, and I should also add, we are, as part of this planning process in the MSA, we'll be dealing with the state of West Virginia, because one county, Jefferson County, West Virginia, is part of the MSA. So I guess a request to all CEEPC members on this call today, if you have any connections, contacts in any of these new counties, please reach out and let us know. We're at the very beginning stages of breaking some new ground and developing some new relationships and bringing our neighbors along with us on this. So next slide. So I mentioned again that we have to have a plan as part of this effort in order to be eligible for the competitive funding. Any projects that we want to seek implementation funding for has to be in the plan. And I would venture to say that EPA didn't do us a lot of favor in the way they rolled this out. They got the grants moving in the August timeframe, but the statutory deadline for the first plan is March 1st, 2024. And I got to tell you, we have a lot of work to do between now and, let's say, January timeframe to be able to run it through the various processes we might want to run it through to get it to final by March 1st. Fortunately, the PCAP, the Priority Climate Action Plan that is due March 1st, is a somewhat streamlined, simplified version of what we need to do in the big picture with the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which isn't due till 2025. So we got some time on the CCAP, but we are going to have a very busy October, November, December on the PCAP. The main components of the PCAP, we have to have a simplified greenhouse gas inventory. As you probably all know, we have a very detailed greenhouse gas inventory for the COG member footprint, but we have no inventory at all for the new counties. So we'll come up with a simplified way to develop that inventory for the new counties. We will have to identify what measures we want to put in this plan, what strategies and actions, and we're going to have to quantify the emission benefits of those. We're going to, for the measures that we included in this plan, we're going to have to do what they call a LIDAC, low income disadvantaged community benefits analysis. And we'll have to look at the authority to implement. Once we turn to the comprehensive plan, we're going to have a comprehensive greenhouse gas inventory. We're going to have projections out to different out years. One thing that I'm not fully versed in yet, but will need to become fully versed in, and this likely will affect this committee as well as maybe the COG board, is that as part of this plan, we have to demonstrate that the strategies and actions in this plan lead us to 50 to 52% reduction by 2030. It's good that we already have a 2030 goal of 50% reduction, so that helps. But we also have to demonstrate that it moves us towards net zero by 2050, and our current goal at the regional level is 80% by 2050. So this will potentially involve some new interesting conversations about our out year goals and targets. And then, like the PCAP, we need to do the LIDAC analysis, but we also would need to do a co-benefits analysis, a co-pollutant analysis, and a plan to leverage other federal funding. And we'll have to do a workforce planning analysis. So a few more additional pieces there. So next slide. So in terms of where we're at, we currently, we had actually a letter ready to send out and to invite, we were going to send it to the chief administrative officers of the counties in the MSA footprint, inviting them to appoint or nominate folks for a steering committee that will hopefully meet a couple times between now and March 1st to help us get the PCAP done, and then reaching out to our agency, sustainability agency leads, many of who are on this call right now, to participate in a technical committee. The letters, like I said, were ready to go out, and then we had an interesting call with the CAO from Warren County, and based on some input from him, as well as the fact that kind of as we were working on this, the notice of funding opportunity, the NOFO, was released on September 20th. And so we're thinking of maybe modifying that letter a little bit to refer explicitly to the NOFO and some other aspects of that. So we're on the verge of doing some invitations. So in addition to the steering and technical committees, we're going to have to do a significant community engagement piece, particularly with our equity emphasis areas, the Justice 40 requirement. We will have to do a multi-stakeholder engagement, so all sectors. I know, for instance, there's a ton of interest, particularly at the state level in the Commonwealth of Virginia, to engage with the data centers. Big deal for our region, and a huge consumer of power. Big impact on our carbon footprint. The other piece of this is that we had released a request for proposals, and we are currently reviewing proposals from consultant teams that have submitted. The scope of work is kind of full scope to cover all aspects of the entirety of the program. So we probably will end up with a task order driven contract with multiple vendors that you could almost treat it in some sense like a menu of, deploying contractors based on our needs. So be it engagement or particularly these like LIDAC analysis, workforce analysis, those kinds of things. So next slide. This is focused on the implementation grant side. So I talked about the planning grants. That's going to be really critical because, like I said, if you want to get implementation funding, you'll have to compete for it. And the only way you'll be eligible to compete for it is if you have the project and the concept in the plan. Interestingly, and it's not what I had expected, I had hoped to see that the federal, the NOFO would include as interest and encouragement to partner with, like utilities or for-profit companies. There's clearly the government slice of our climate problem is important, but it's, if we really want to get to scale that we need to solve this problem, we're going to need to engage the for-profit sector and folks like the utilities. Interestingly, the way the NOFO is rigged, it's much more focused on state, municipal, government entities. So we're going to need to probably submit some questions to EPA about exactly what they're thinking they want to fund, because it's a little different perhaps than what I had thought. But I want to encourage you probably to start thinking along the lines of government program funding. So like if you don't currently have a building energy performance benchmarking program or a building energy performance standards program, that they may be willing to fund that to prop up such type of new policies and programs, as opposed to funding a private sector entity to swap out some technology system or something may not be quite what they're looking for. So we will keep working on that. But again, it's really focused on municipal, state government entities, and COG as the entity that's leading the development of the plan. We will be able to form a coalition of state and local government members who wish to partner together to go in for a joint application if we so desire. Unlike anything I've ever seen, they're running this in parallel. So the planning grant has started, the NOFO is out. The deadline for the NOFO is shown here on this slide is a month after we submit the plan. So we have this really interesting opportunity to both develop the plan and come up with our strategy for if and how we're going to compete for implementation funding all in the next 3-4 months. So it's going to be a busy time for us. If you go to the next slide. This covers the details, some of the details that's in the NOFO in terms of what they're looking for. Obviously, implementation of things that will reduce emissions is the key takeaway from this slide. And we're able to seek funding, if we so desire, to either expand some existing initiatives that and I would venture to say maybe in the short term, that's the way to go, because they're going to want shovel ready. If we have something out there that right now is already working well and we think we can expand it, I would suggest that we probably would want to go that route as opposed to necessarily, at least out of the gates, trying to break a bunch of new ground. And, as you all know, things like that take quite some time. So next slide. I mentioned it is multi-sector, so we will be looking at all opportunities across all sectors. Keep in mind that as part of this, they are asking us to think about how we can leverage this with other programs. And as you're aware, there's a lot of other funding opportunities out there. So thinking about how we can do this in an efficient way and, target the funding request in areas that really need it and can get things moving quickly. So next slide. One thing that really jumped out at me is the magnitude of some of the limits on the grants. This would be the first time I think I've worked on a program that is seeking concepts upwards of $500 million. So we shall see what we come up with. My hunch is we'll be somewhere in that range between tier A and tier E, but Yet to be determined. We'll see. And I think that's it. So happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you, Mr. King. It's quite a big range between tier A and tier E. So I have to say, and not only that, what makes me personally most jittery is the very short time that we have in front of us. I mean, this is really pressurized. Are there any comments? I see Ms. McBride. I will ask you to be brief in your questions.
Yes, thank you. But really quick, I think Randy's hand might have been up before mine, so I want to defer to him.
Okay, well, thank you, Dimitra. I would just say that one significant opportunity that could be of interest for many of the counties, at least in Virginia, is the possibility of looking at community choice aggregation or municipal aggregation, with the basic idea being that if we could come up with a regional approach that would allow us to procure 100% zero carbon electricity and sell it to residents and businesses at a low rate, it could really help many of the counties hit their 50% greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And frankly, if we can't clean up the electricity supply, it's going to be really hard to meet those goals. And note that Alexandria has looked at this individually. Loudoun has looked at it individually. Prince William is just in the process of looking at it individually right now. To any individual county, the hurdle of plunking down over $1 million to figure out the administrative and regulatory issues looks like a huge hurdle. But if there's kind of an economy of scale, I get it that this could not be done for Virginia, DC, and Maryland because the laws are different in all three of those states. But I think it's a really good opportunity. Thank you.
In the interest of time and looking a little bit on our agenda, I would ask everybody to get back to Mr. King on these. I'm absolutely certain that a huge flow, an Amazonian flow of ideas and positions will be triggered by this funding opportunity here. I believe we'll talk about that again. But I would like now to go, to progress in our agenda to our next item, which is about an update on equity and climate, which, actually it's part of this as well, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair. My presentation will cover COG's coordinated approach to developing equity across three programmatic areas that would be climate and air. It does have air quality and climate up there, but I would also include energy as well. That work will be implemented through CEEPC, MWAC, which are the two policy committees, and two technical committees, MWAC and TAC, and as well as the Air and Climate Public Advisory Committee. There is other equity work being done throughout COG and other programmatic areas and departments that would include transportation, housing, and health. So again, this presentation will just cover climate, energy, and air programs, and Robert has already forwarded. Thank you. And so some background to the context of the proposed approach. In May, MWAC, the Metropolitan Washington Air Quality Committee, agreed to incorporate racial equity or racial equity lens in its 2024 work program. They also approved developing a new document to address environmental justice, which I will describe a bit later. And then also under the COG framework, again, MWAC has its own board separate from the COG boards. So under COG, really CEEPC will be doing this work, the framework through CEEPC, the committee agreed to, or for ACPAC to update the Environmental Justice Toolkit in March. MWAC did that as well. The 2017 toolkit, which was the first iteration, focused on 9 approaches to community engagement. So we'll be, ACPAC is responsible for updating that toolkit. And then you also just heard from Jeff regarding the Climate Pollution Reduction Act, CPRG program, also led by CEEPC. And so we'll be doing some community engagement, or the new term LIDAC. There's lots of acronyms under that. And then I believe most of us should be aware of J40, which is the out of the White House Justice 40 initiative, which requires any project to have 40% of the benefits of their project are in LIDAC communities or vulnerable communities. So next slide, please. And also here should say what MWAC and CEEPC are planning to do. So this is the CEEPC committee, but what we're looking to do across MWAC and CEEPC is to have a multi-pronged collaborative approach. Staff has been thinking quite literally a lot about what a coordinated approach across for equity would be across those programs. And again, we're looking at the Environmental Justice Toolkit. Again, that original iteration was on community engagement. It is, 5 years old now, so we expect that there's some other or more appropriate ways to engage vulnerable communities. So we'll be digging into that. And with the CPRG program and engaging with those LIDAC communities, we have a good sense across the 24 member governments within the COG footprint, but we'll need to engage those other communities. And we really want to have a grassroots approach to all of this work. And we've been talking about that in ACPAC as well. And then with the new resource guide, that's a joint exercise between, as it says here, COG, but really CEEPC and MWAC. The approach here was agreed to at MWAC TAC last week, I think it was, and it's consistent with COG's Region United framework. Back in 2020, the COG board affirmed racial equity as a fundamental value, and staff has been working across all of its programs, including not only climate and energy and air, but across the transportation to incorporate equity into its work program. So we're building on that premise and including the Metropolitan Washington Planning Framework that has all of that, which is pretty much the COG's mission. And so again, that requirement will filter down into our CPRG work. And so next slide, please. And I'll try to go a bit faster so we are on time. And so what will this resource guide look like? It's a joint approach to equity. We'll be looking at a lot of the best practices across different sectors. Staff has been looking at best practices through our technical committee, measuring climate and energy equity, looking at metrics. How do you measure metrics in those areas? There's been a lot of work in looking at drivers of equity. What are the opportunities to address inequities in those areas? So we'll be looking into that and looking to incorporate that into the resource guide. And next slide, please. And so some of the immediate actions, we'll be looking at doing a survey. We've been talking about this since I think the beginning of the summer, and that survey would be a very quick survey across CEEPC, MWAC, and BIAC, and the Metropolitan Washington Technical Advisory Committee. And we're looking for that survey to sort of gauge what our local governments are looking for across equity. And then that will feed into a statement of work for a consultant to outline what the environmental justice toolkit would include and what the resource guide would include. Again, we have some ideas of what the resource guide should include, but we're trying to parse out what will be the environmental justice toolkit. Should it be just focused on engagement again? We do have some approaches in that area, but we want to make sure that it's a coordinated approach across all of these programs, and then they complement each other. We don't want to repeat things that we've already done. We want to have value added in terms of equity. And next slide, please. And so we'll be seeking your input and your approval on this approach from CEEPC, MWAC, and across our local governments to include the update, to also have a statement of work to develop what the toolkit will look like, what the resource guide will look like, and how to engage communities for the CPRG. And next slide, please. And then finally, although here we are looking at, in terms of either directly reaching out to staff in terms of your ideas, but we're also looking to collect input in MWAC's public comment. Again, this is CEEPC, but we will be trying to collect all of this information in one location. So you're, again, able to provide input directly to staff or through this email that you have here. And I will end it here.
Thank you, Ms. Boggs. I would like to invite any comments on the topic or questions. First, here in the room.
Thank you for the presentation. Is the update of the EJ toolkit making use of any of the resources from GARE, the Government Alliance for Racial Equity?
Well, we haven't started the update yet, but we certainly will engage them. We're working with GARE at COG, where they're part of our training programs that we've had. And I think we're actually engaged in a training program now. We also neglected to say we have our committee, CEOC, committee, Chief Equity Officers Committee that actually meets tomorrow, and they work very closely with GARE. We've had we're working on our third cohort that GARE has designed for us. So we're certainly have been engaging them and will continue to engage them.
Yes, Ms. Ivy.
Just made me wonder, are you engaging with Dr. Jacoby Wilson from the University of Maryland?
Well, we actually have had a presentation from Dr. Jacoby Wilson, and we're aware of him, but so we'll continue to engage. We're reaching out. We hope to have input from grassroots community engagement. So we certainly have Dr. Jacoby Wilson on our radar screen in terms of who to reach out to and the experts in this area.
Okay, I appreciate that. He's been really helpful in Prince George's County with the air quality monitors that we've already set up in different parts of the county. We want to expand that program. You know, we should be able to get more funding for it next year, but who knows with this economy. But okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other comments from the room? From the virtual room? I just encourage everybody to engage with this. This is a bi-directional process. It helps us, it doesn't only help to inform COG as a whole and as an organization on how to include equity in environment and environmental justice in our policy thinking. It also helps everybody else in corresponding action to understand where the gaps are. I have to say it sticks to my mind. I remember our very first meeting this year starting when a representative of a chapter, DC chapter of the NAACP stood up and said, literally, you have to think about the fact that 1 kilowatt hour, provided to a charging station for what you are talking, because the topic was about EVs, is a kilowatt hour missing in my community. And as long as this statement is even remotely true, we have a problem that we need to provide a credible solution for. So thank you so much for this. And now I would like to pivot to an important topic for our work on climate that we already talked a little bit. We touched on that. Our climate and energy action plan identifies that clean energy deployment is a key action component. And we have committed as a region to meet greenhouse gas reduction goals of 50% by 2030. And as we heard from Mr. King, probably things will get even tighter, and we will utter the, net zero. We will utter this phrase that we will want to get to net zero by 2050. So the board of our organization, the COG board, has asked this committee, CEEPC, for recommendations on what strategies and actions could accelerate adoption of renewable and specifically, explicitly solar energy. The hope is that the work of our committee can assist staff in developing and bringing a set of recommendations to the COG board this fall. So the idea is to have the COG board absorb and discuss these recommendations on their November meeting. So I will call it a solar October, right? The outcome of our discussion today, which I want to invite you to participate now, will set the stage for crafting a COG board resolution with specific recommendations on goals, targets, and strategies and actions. So we have about half an hour, a little bit more than half an hour, for an open round discussion, of a roundtable discussion. And as a first, so for me, just to structure this discussion a little bit, would be the first part is, what are you, how do you react to policies and actions to expand renewable energy deployments, and things that we just talked about, local government facilities, schools in particular, large offsite locations, carports, and the like. So that's my first question to this committee. And you can, and I will recognize everybody who wants to start this conversation. Staff or agency representative and elected officials.
So this is Erica with Prince George's County. I would like to start the conversation initially with a comment that I made to Mr. King at our RAV meeting. It's my understanding that the current goal has a primary focus on the installation of rooftop solar. Here in Prince George's County, we are near completion on 5 sites of solar canopies. And we would like for efforts related to installation of solar canopies over parking lots to be considered as a part of the goal setting process for the Council of Governments.
And would you say, if I may ask, that this should be translated into general goal for the entire region?
I would say the current goal should be massaged so that it allows for emerging technologies and emerging deployment concepts in the renewable energy field. So I've been working with Jeff and Leah for many years now, They are always doing such a wonderful job there. I just don't know how they maintain the stamina. But I think the original goal was really focused on rooftop. And we just want to ensure that any future goals take into consideration different emerging technologies and deployment tactics for expanding solar within the region, such as solar canopies. I recently saw in a community also where they're actually installing solar PVs over water structures. I've seen solar PVs now being installed over stormwater management canals. So there's many types of deployment mechanisms that are being explored and piloted throughout the nation. And I just want our goal to, be open to those types of deployment mechanisms.
Can I ask you just a follow-up question on this? Is your jurisdiction requiring at some point these, or just rewarding the proposal of installing these? Is there policy that drives that?
We've always been a very active member with the Council of Governments to sort of drive the climate action goals that are within that plan. We are currently developing the implementation strategy for our climate action plan. Within that plan, we have two priorities. One is to promote the increase of solar deployment in private buildings, commercial buildings, et cetera, within the county, and for our government operations to be 100% powered by renewable energy. So those are two key priorities that are sort of driving the deployment of solar within the county. We also partnered with Council of Government some years ago to receive some funds to help look at streamlining permitting, looking at what type of siting challenges or barriers that may exist in the county. Some of those items that sort of came out of that grant program were incorporated into our permitting agency's solar permitting process, as well as in the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning's solar guidance document that provides sort of the governing structure of how community solar and other solar systems can be built within Prince George's County.
Thank you. Any other comments? I will go to the physical room first.
Thank you. It's Jolene Ivy. And Erica, I just wanted to ask, number one, are you taking over for Andrea Crooms for a while she's out on maternity leave? I heard someone's name, but I wasn't sure whose it was. Is that you?
I've been an active member of CEEPC for many years. So yes, I will continue to be a part of this group.
No, I meant that your position with the county.
No, I am not actually the acting director of the Department of the Environment. I am not.
Okay. All right. I wanted to check about that. But then I don't know if you were on the meeting yet, but I mentioned earlier that I'm working with a developer of the two big apartment buildings going over in Woodmore Town Center for them to put in solar panels in the parking lot. They're not able to reach what our requirements are for trees in the parking lot. So we're trying to find other ways to reach the basic goals of trees. So solar panels and also pervious pavers. So, we can talk about that offline, but I just wanted to touch base with you about it. Thanks.
Great. We look forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep, Dory Estrada, City of Tacoma Park. Just want to second what was mentioned by Erica and just share a couple other thoughts and observations at the local level. One is, excuse me, that it's come to our attention that tree canopy shading is I'm not going to use the word detriment, but a challenge for some areas that would like to implement traditional rooftop solar. So I just want to second that the creative use of canopy installations is kind of essential, right? We don't want tree canopy to come into conflict with renewable energy generation, especially since we all know how important that is. And second, that for multifamily and commercial buildings who would like to have solar, for a lot of older buildings, just the upfront cost of retrofits and other like fixes first. So the building may need a new roof, for example, before solar can be installed is quite a barrier, I think, to some property owners. So if there was a way programmatically to provide other supportive funding or incentives to make those fixes first so that solar then becomes possible, I would just recommend that as something to look into. And third, there's again, the challenge of historic downtowns, which have historic buildings that might also be good candidates for solar, but then there are sometimes these regulations that those types of retrofits to historic buildings are not possible. So just pointing out that that might be another regulatory thing to work through as we talk about this. But yeah, thank you.
But how about public buildings?
Yeah.
The square footage, the exposed the solar, productive square footage of public buildings tends theoretically to be more available and not obstructed by tree canopy, and it's also more, under the control of local government.
Yeah, speaking from the city of Tacoma Park, we're a huge proponent of it. We have solar at the community center in our city, where also the city's offices are. And with a library renovation going on in our city, we will also be hopefully expanding the amount of panels on the roof as the footprint of the building is expanding a bit. I think that's absolutely something this council should pursue.
And these are owned and operated by the city, or are these, leased? And so what is the preferred regime? Or
That the panels themselves being owned and
Yes.
operated, I believe perhaps Councilmember Dubala, whose time exceeds mine in the city, can speak further on this. I believe that they are leased out to an energy company. Thank you.
Yeah, we're thinking about whether the expansion would be owning the panels, but the original setup was leased.
Oh, thank you, Council Member. You cannot imagine how many people are interested in these kind of practical decisions.
So if I may take a moment, because I was about to press my button, I don't have a good enough grasp of the current. Listening to Erica made me realize I don't have a good.
Can you just?
I don't
yes.
listening to Erica made me realize I don't have a good enough grasp of current policy strategies and incentives to really know how to push it. So as part of going back to the board, that might be if I don't understand it, maybe they don't either. That might be something. And then in doing that, we might find, as we heard from Erica, some of the gems of what's already working that could be applied region-wide. So that's just a way to approach the question. What more can we do is essentially what the board wants to know, right? And to that question, there's what can COG do, and then there's what can happen at the local level, which is in part about zoning. And I don't know if we want to go there. But if those questions get asked in the building process, in the renovation process, but as I said, I don't have enough of a base to really understand what more can be done. Hopefully there are other people online that can meet that challenge.
Thank you, Council Member. I find myself always challenged to grasp the entirety of the transformation that we have to enable with policy, and starting with a strong statement that we want to get somewhere is really a good start. I see in the virtual room Ms. McBride from Arlington County. I would like to recognize her.
Oh, yes, thank you. Very quickly, I'd like to second the interest in parking lot. I know that it's a little bit more expensive than rooftop, but of course that depends on what you have to invest to make the property solar ready. In a place, and I realize that we're somewhat specialized, but not alone in the COG region, where our density and our size creates a lot of very high, but not very broad buildings. So getting solar to pencil out on top of buildings systemically doesn't always work, but I think that we have a lot of untouched property. The other thing that I know that the AIR team has put into the Community Energy Plan Roadmap, the implementation framework for years 3 through 5, which starts on January 1st, is a focus on possibly in that regard partnering with places of worship and nonprofit agencies inside Arlington County, because they tend to have a lot of parking lot space, more so on average. And their buildings actually have the roof space that would accommodate that. So we think that there's untouched potential in the faith-based community and in the nonprofit community.
Thank you. Places of worship, they have a lot of parking. Are there any other comments on this round about approaching renewable energy deployments, solar arrays in this case, on local government facilities, large offsite location carports?
Well, if you wouldn't mind, Jolene Ivy again, it really makes me think that having a regional approach, like if all of the areas agreed that we were going to require solar over parking lots, for example, then it would take away the argument that you get from the developers who tell you, well, it costs too much to build there, so we'll just go build somewhere else. Well, they can't leave the whole DMV. So if it's just as expensive to build something here as there, then maybe we can, if we're unified, we can really move the needle. But if it's only, for example, Prince George's County comes up with that idea, then it really will give them a greater argument to push development someplace else.
Thank you, Councilmember. I believe that in the spirit and intention of the Coke Board's request to our committee is exactly that, is the idea of harmonizing the approach, where this would be, requiring or not. This is something to be determined, but it's definitely a more harmonized approach. So people should be, when they plan for investments in this region, they should be thinking about these things and calculating. So I don't see any other hands right now on this round. I would like.
Just one other comment.
Okay.
I apologize. Just two other thoughts. One is I think implementing the workforce on this topic would be also essential. There's a wonderful program that I think existed in DC that trains summer youth to install solar panels. It's like a summer internship program. I apologize if someone from DC is on the call. I don't remember the name of it. But those kinds of opportunities, these green jobs of the future, are very impactful for our region. And as much as we can, implementing workforce strategies with the deployment of solar for local job seekers, that would be, I think, important. And second, there's some wonderful local technology companies, for example, one spun out from the University of Maryland I can think of, that are utilizing this in kind of the transit space, particularly for bus stops. So any way that there can be a collaboration with what's going on transit development wise to implement solar in bus stop areas would also be, I think, a really good thing to pursue.
Excellent. Thank you for these thoughts. Let me start a different level of conversation here that has to do with the procurement of renewable energy. And we had already, I believe, Mr. Freed from Prince Williams County already hinted to that. So what part of, what kind of focus should we try to introduce in terms of procuring renewable energy. I know that my jurisdiction is is now 100% renewable because we have committed to a contract that buys the electrons or the corresponding credits from a huge solar array in South Virginia. That doesn't mean that we have solved our ongoing procurement. This is the baseline for today. It was a challenging thing. We could make it in collaboration with a huge multinational company that's also benefiting from that. But this was important. So I see one hand, Ms. Ashbacher.
Yes, I think that this is a great topic. So if I just want to somewhat echo what Randy Freed talked about in terms of a lot of our climate and energy action plans, including the COG regional plan, does rely on cleaning the grid or renewables to help us meet our goals. So it does seem like it's a very important topic. And it does seem like there is some element of large scale solar that would have to be a part of that to actually, if we don't buy RECs. So some of it's a policy decision, but it does seem like it's a worthy topic to consider as part of a resolution. And then as part of that, there will of course be a lot of questions about how to reach that goal. And in terms of procurement, how can we do some joint procurement? It may have to be by state, Maryland, Virginia, DC, but large scale power purchase agreements or virtual power purchase agreements or whatever is available, at least for looking at county operations as a start. I know Randy was talking about community-wide, which is also critical to meeting the larger goals, but I do think having technical assistance to help us all look at this issue, to have joint procurement opportunities where we can leverage our resources, and then also some discussion in terms of the land use issues that go along with this. Where are these solar farms going to be, and who's going to decide, and how does that all work?
Thank you, Ms. Ashbacher. Are there any other comments on this topic? I don't see any. I have to say, personally, this is a huge deal. How we procure renewable energy, how we make sure that we the energy that everybody in our jurisdictions consumes is produced responsibly in accordance with the demands of managing the energy crisis, the climate crisis. There are many issues here. Among others, it's the big stakeholders, those who produce energy, who also hold an interest in how energy is distributed and how it is transmitted. And disentangling these networks and these policies will be a huge challenge for everybody. But we have literally an urgent interest in understanding that better and making and stride forward to not only establish that our procurement has to occur in a way that is that helps us achieve our goals, our climate goals, but also making possible that we produce locally enough renewables to supplement that. For us Virginians, and you heard from Mr. King before how important it is now that we have a larger enhanced region in Virginia joining the MSA. It is a very big deal because we need to we deal with a utility that just a few years ago was saying that the demand from data centers is manageable. To a couple of years ago, they said no, it's not manageable anymore. This is too much for us. And now the Dominion Power is seriously proposing investment in new so-called peaker plants that will be consuming fossil fuels to supplement the peak demand from the enormous sector of data centers. This is a real challenge. It's not small potatoes. It's really tough. So we may want to dwell on this on when we consider our recommendations to Cook Board as well. A third and final round is about how specific should we be about our solar or rooftop solar or otherwise solar targets? Should we go ahead and say these are recommendations and let's put a number on that to motivate us to achieve something? What is measurable is achievable, right? And should we say, for example, should we go for 250,000 rooftop installations by the year 2030, for example? Is that a good idea?
And if I may, just so folks know, back in 2007, when the COG Climate Change Steering Committee was gearing up to make recommendations to the board that ultimately adopted the 2008 climate report, there was actually a debate in this room about this very topic. And interestingly, the conversation then was, should we set a megawatt goal or a rooftop goal? And the idea was, well, nobody really knows what a megawatt is. It's pretty hard to kind of grasp that, but everybody can kind of get the solar rooftop. So let's go with the solar rooftop goal. And the words were used something along the lines of it will help create a constituency for climate, drive that kind of climate action. So they set a goal of 10,000 solar roofs. And at the time we were well below below 600, I think it was like 400 systems. And the next year it was 450 systems and 500. It was really slow. And it's the only time I've been here at the COG board, other than perhaps the gun policy issue that didn't work out so well, where the COG board actually, or CEEPC actually went and lowered the goal. Like we didn't think we would rate 10,000, and so they lowered it to 5,000. And finally, solar was in the money, and the market took off, and so we beat the 10,000 goal. And there was a goal of 20,000 by I think 2020. We've exceeded that. We're currently up to around 72,000 solar rooftops. We're about to see Dulles Airport get plastered with solar. Dulles soon will be the greenest airport in the country, thanks in part to partnership with Dominion and the leadership of MWA, the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And as part of our 2030 plan development, it's interesting you say 250,000. That was some of the analysis that went into whether or not we can reach our 2030 goal. We would need on the order of 250,000 solar roofs. Is that contribution? There'd be a bunch of other things we need to do, but just wanted to give you that background.
Thank you. Very interesting conversation. Are there any comments on this?
I was just going to.
Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. So we already have solar goals. We've passed them.
We've already achieved the goals that have been set. There is currently no new goal.
So to me, setting a new goal makes perfect sense. What I'm not completely clear on is whether we are talking about what government operations can do with all of these questions, or whether we're talking about what government can get communities as a whole to do. So for example, I didn't mention before, Montgomery County has gotten state legislative approval, because that's what it took, in order to be able to do community-based, I'm forgetting the term.
CCA?
CCA, to do community choice aggregation. It changed a few times in the several years it took to get that through. So that will then, everybody in Montgomery County that doesn't opt out will be one part of a power pool that bids for renewably supplied energy. That's a huge undertaking. There is this example maybe folks in Virginia can take a look at that. But that's very different from Tacoma Park putting solar on its library. So is the COG board looking for both?
I have the impression that yes,
Okay.
at least at the level of our proposals. The question is, what do we believe that it should be?
I think it should be both.
Yeah.
And I would say that with solar, we already have the housing target model. And so for me, we have the state and DC rec levels to tear down from, because those are already established. That's not even new news. It seems like going to local targets, they're only targets, wouldn't be that tough to, on a technical level, to come up with the numbers. So I would think we'd want to do that, yes.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Dybala. Any other comments on this? Penny Gross.
Thank you. I think that setting goals and expanding those goals, great, both for municipal and for private. Two things that I'm concerned about. When we worked on this in Fairfax County, trying to set up a number of rooftops, schools and county, we discovered that we needed to have a certain amount, or the solar installers were not going to bid on it. If we dropped down, if one roof didn't, then they didn't have the capacity to do it. We needed to have a certain amount. And I'm wondering, with private installation, and we've been pretty successful in Fairfax County and in Northern Virginia overall, but is there an issue with capacity for the installers to actually do the work? It's one thing to set goals. It's another thing to set us up for failure, because we haven't taken into consideration, are there enough providers to do this in a timely fashion? And I with the experience we've had in Fairfax County, I was a little disappointed, quite frankly, that the providers were not able to do what we had thought we had set out to do. So that would be my question. It's not unlike, going with native plants, and the nurseries need three years to be able to provide the stock. I think it's the same thing with capacity for the installers. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very valid point. And we heard already here discussing about how we grow our workforce to serve these kind of goals. I see, I cannot see.
Me?
Yes, please.
Okay,
I cannot
thank
see
you.
your name, unfortunately. Yes, Monique.
Yes, Councilmember Monique Ashton from the city of Rockville. I wanted to note that I agree with the idea of creating new goals. Even if we don't have them implemented by that time, we should initiate and plan for them, right? So I think that sometimes there are some barriers that we'll have to overcome. And if there is a demand, then there will be more people who invest in the space. I think that we should be looking for jurisdictions to both be encouraging and also support jurisdictions to do that. In addition to the roof comment, because I know for our city, there was some analysis done and there were issues with putting solar on some of the roofs. But we are looking at solar canopy on two. We're finally getting our first solar canopy, but it's still, in the planning phase. We could have more solar canopy in the areas in the jurisdictions where it might not apply to roofs. So I wanted to make sure that as we think about the goals, that we have some flexibility for how to get things done and not just look at the barriers on what they are. And then for the comment by made on thinking about capacity, I think as long as people are at least planning for or have something where there's an intention to do it, I think that also supports the goals. And then I like the comments earlier about seeing how we could help jurisdictions with PPAs and making the procurement easier. PPAs have been around, I think, for at least a decade or so. So there's a lot that we already know about how they're working. And then the last thing I would say is the city of Rockville, through the Montgomery County Solar Co-op. I think we're the jurisdictions with the highest number of residents signing up. I think we should, look for goals on how many new residences are getting them and really push and support our residents to do that. I think that EV is very important, but we also need that charged car to plug into renewable energy. So I see them as tandem needs.
Thank you, Council Member. Very valid points. And I have to say, the success of solar co-ops is just a prelude to if we set a goal and we try to get there, people and us and organizations and the civic sphere will find ways, and will be very innovative in doing that. And I also have to say that solar panels just a few years ago were considered like an addition that doesn't contribute too much, and it's too much, not enough juice for the squeeze, etc. And the increased efficiency of this is telling us a completely different story nowadays. They produce real LNG. They can contribute a lot to our portfolio, and so this is really an important thing.
And on that point, can I just make one more comment? Our
Sure.
jurisdiction saw a major rise in some of our costs for utilities. And so that may be a strategy to help us manage our budgets as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
Just a quick question, not to veer off track, but is it theoretically a possibility that implementation funding from the CRPG could be used to support regional metropolitan governments with installation if there was a goal set for that?
I would venture to say absolutely. My initial staff level thinking has been, the feds are pumping a ton of money into the EV charging deployment space through things like the CFI grant. And so if this is a new pot of money that, where we're not seeing that kind of support, we might want to prioritize solar, renewables, and almost everything that's been discussed today as part of the PCAP and part of the competitive bid. Yes.
Okay. So it's noon. This is the time for our meeting to be adjourned. I just take away from this conversation, for which I thank everybody who participated and who will also be participating, because this is a new topic. I take away that we are going to work towards proposals for a COG resolution in November, which means that we will have to accelerate our networking in October so that we get some of the topics that we touched upon today into this and into a coherent row so that it begins to look like a policy proposal.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll work with you, Chair Karen Tonis, to figure out the exact process we want to use. I think we probably have enough to start drafting aspects of this resolution. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, CEEPC meets in the morning before the board, so we probably could bring this to you in the morning of November 15th before it goes to the board as well. But given the timing, you're right. We're going to need some sort of engagement in October.
Would you be looking for members of this committee to volunteer to be involved between now and the next meeting?
I would definitely welcome that.
I would like to
But
volunteer.
let's communicate
Thank you.
right after this meeting. Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn? We are at 12 noon.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Doesn't need a second. Any objections? I wish everybody a very pleasant rest of the day. We are going to continue here, some of us at least, for the MWAC meeting.
Yeah, so there is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, lunches in the lounge here. MWAC starts at 12.